The telegram trembled in Clara Norwood's hand as she stood outside the telegraph office, the desert wind whipping her chestnut hair across her face. 3 months she had been waiting for word from her father. 3 long months since he'd left for San Francisco with promises of fortune and a better life for them both. Now, with the dust of Copper Creek settling on her worn boots and her last coins spent on a reply message that might never be answered, Clara felt the weight of abandonment pressing down on her shoulders like the merciless Arizona sun. The year was 1875, and Copper Creek was barely a town, just a collection of weathered buildings straddling the stagecoach route between Tucson and Yuma. The telegraph office doubled as the general store, run by Mr. Holloway, a sympathetic but practical man who had started giving Clara pitying glances about a month ago. "Miss Norwood," he called from the doorway, his gray mustache twitching with discomfort. "Office is closing soon. Perhaps tomorrow will bring your reply." Clara nodded without turning around. Tomorrow. Always tomorrow. She had heard those words so many times they had lost their meaning. Her teaching position at the small schoolhouse paid just enough to keep her room at Mrs. Finch's boarding house, but not enough to follow her father west. Not enough to start over somewhere else. "Same time tomorrow, Mr. Holloway," she said, forcing a smile as she folded the telegram and tucked it into her pocket. As Clara turned to leave, the distant sound of hoofbeats drew her attention. A lone rider approached from the east, silhouetted against the setting sun. His horse moved at an unhurried pace, raising small clouds of dust with each step. There was something familiar about the rider's posture, something that made Clara pause despite her weariness. The horse, a magnificent chestnut gelding, came to a stop in front of the telegraph office. The rider dismounted with a fluid grace that spoke of a lifetime in the saddle. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a face tanned by years under the open sky. His eyes, blue as a summer sky, locked with hers. "Miss Norwood," he said, removing his hat. "Been a while." Clara felt her breath catch in her throat. Beau Quincy. Beau had been gone from Copper Creek for nearly 2 years, having left to join a cattle drive north. Before that, he'd been the ranch hand at the Norwood place before her father sold it to chase rumors of gold. Beau had asked her to wait for him back then, but Clara had chosen loyalty to her father instead. "Heard about your father," he said, his voice gentle as he stepped closer. "Mr. Holloway mentioned you've been waiting on a telegram." Clara stiffened. "He'll reply, he's just busy with his new business ventures." Beau's expression remained neutral, but his eyes softened with something that might have been pity. "Of course. How long have you been waiting?" 3 months, she admitted. But he sent a telegram before that, saying he was establishing himself. That he would send for me soon. Beau nodded slowly, looking past her at the telegraph office where Mr. Holloway was preparing to lock up for the night. 3 months is a long time. "I have nowhere else to go," Clara said, the words slipping out before she could stop them. She straightened her shoulders. "But I'll be fine. The school needs me." Beau looked at her for a long moment, then glanced at the fading light. "Let me walk you home. It's getting dark." Clara wanted to refuse, to tell him she'd been walking herself home every day for months, but something in his expression stopped her. Instead, she nodded and fell into step beside him as he led his horse by the reins. The main street of Copper Creek was quiet as they walked. Most businesses had already closed, and the saloon was the only place showing signs of life, piano music spilling out into the evening air. "How was the cattle drive?" Clara asked, breaking the silence between them. "Profitable," Beau replied. "Took a herd all the way to Wyoming. Saved most of my pay." He glanced at her. "I've bought land, Clara, good land with water rights just north of town." Clara felt a twinge of something, pride, perhaps, or regret. "That's wonderful, Beau. You always said you wanted your own spread." "I did." He paused in front of Mrs. Finch's boarding house, a 2-story building with a small porch and neat curtains in the windows. "And now I have it. 20 acres to start with an option for more." Clara smiled, genuinely happy for him despite her own circumstances. "Congratulations, you deserve it." Beau studied her face in the fading light. I hear you're at the school now. Yes. The children are wonderful. It's not much pay, but it's enough. She didn't add that it was barely enough, that she had been skipping meals to save for a ticket to San Francisco when her father sent for her. I remember you always had a way with learning, Beau said with a small smile. You taught me to read proper, remember? Clara remembered. Long summer evenings on the Norwood porch, Beau hunched over a book, his brow furrowed in concentration as she guided him through the words. He'd been embarrassed at first, a grown man of 20 who could barely write his name, but he'd been determined. You were a good student, she replied. Beau's smile widened slightly. Had a good teacher. He looked up at the boarding house, then back at her. I'll be in town for a few days, getting supplies for the ranch. Maybe I'll see you around. Clara nodded, suddenly reluctant to end their conversation. Maybe you will. He tipped his hat to her and turned to leave, leading his horse back toward the livery stable. Clara watched him go, noticing the way his shoulders seemed broader than she remembered, the confident set of his stride. As she climbed the steps to Mrs. Finch's front door, Clara's hand went to her pocket, feeling the crumpled telegram inside. For the first time in months, she hadn't spent the entire walk home thinking about her father's silence. The next morning, Clara rose early as usual, pinning her hair neatly and donning one of her 2 teaching dresses, the blue one that was beginning to fray at the cuffs, but didn't show the wear as badly as the brown. Mrs. Finch had breakfast waiting, as always, though Clara noticed her portion seemed a bit larger than usual. You're too thin, dear, the landlady said when Clara raised an eyebrow at the extra biscuit. A growing girl needs her strength. Clara smiled but didn't correct the woman about the growing part. At 22, she was fully grown, but Mrs. Finch still thought of her as the 17-year-old who had arrived with her father 5 years ago. Thank you, she said instead, gratefully accepting the food. The schoolhouse was a short walk from town, a simple one-room building that served the children of Copper Creek and the surrounding farms. Clara loved the moment of quiet before her students arrived, the stillness of the room with its neat rows of desks and the blackboard she carefully cleaned each evening. She was writing the day's lessons when the door opened, and she turned, expecting to see one of her early arriving pupils. Instead, Beau Quincy stood in the doorway, his hat in his hands. Good morning, Miss Norwood, he said formally, though his eyes held a warmth that belied the stiffness of his words. Mr. Quincy, she replied, surprised. Can I help you with something? Beau stepped into the room, looking around at the desks and the maps on the walls. Just wanted to see where you teach. It's a fine school. It's small, but it serves our needs, Clara said, feeling oddly self-conscious as Beau examined her domain. We have 15 students now, from 6 to 13 years old. Beau nodded, running a hand along one of the desks. Must keep you busy. It does, but I enjoy it. Clara set down her chalk. Was there something specific you needed? The children will be arriving soon. Beau looked up, meeting her eyes directly. I'm heading to the Telegraph office after this. Thought maybe you'd want me to check if there's anything for you, save you the trip during your lunch hour. Clara felt a flush of embarrassment. Did everyone in town know about her daily pilgrimages to the Telegraph office? That's kind but unnecessary. I like the walk. Of course. Beau twisted his hat in his hands, then placed it back on his head. Just thought I'd offer. As he turned to leave, Clara found herself speaking. Beau, wait, he paused, looking back at her. Thank you for the offer. It's been difficult waiting. His expression softened. I know what it's like to wait for someone, Clara. Before she could respond to the gentle reminder of their past, the door swung open again and 2 of her youngest students tumbled in, chattering excitedly. By the time Clara had greeted them and turned back to the door, Beau was gone. The school day passed in its usual rhythm of lessons, recitations, and the small dramas that made up the lives of her students. Clara found her thoughts straying to Beau more than once, remembering his words. I know what it's like to wait for someone. When she dismissed the children at 3 o'clock, Clara tidied the schoolroom quickly and set out for the telegraph office with more haste than usual. The familiar route through town seemed shorter somehow, her steps lighter despite the knowledge that likely awaited her. Mr. Holloway looked up when she entered, his expression telling her everything before he spoke. "Nothing today, Miss Norwood," Clara nodded, the disappointment familiar but no less sharp. "Thank you for checking." As she turned to leave, Mr. Holloway cleared his throat. "That Quincy fella was asking about you earlier. Said he might be by the Spotted Horse tonight if you were of a mind to stop in." Clara raised her eyebrows in surprise. The Spotted Horse was Copper Creek's respectable saloon, catering to travelers and townspeople rather than the rougher crowd that frequented the Dusty Boot on the edge of town. Still, it wasn't a place she normally visited. "Thank you for passing along the message," she said carefully. Outside, Clara hesitated. Her usual routine would take her back to the boarding house for a quiet evening of grading papers and planning lessons. But the thought of another solitary night in her small room suddenly seemed unbearable. Before she could change her mind, Clara redirected her steps toward Mrs. Finch's. If she was going to visit the Spotted Horse, she would at least change into her good dress first. An hour later, Clara stood outside the saloon, smoothing down the skirt of her green dress, the one she saved for special occasions. She had pinned her hair differently, allowing a few curls to frame her face, and even added a touch of rose water, a luxury she rarely indulged in. Taking a deep breath, she pushed open the door and stepped inside. The Spotted Horse was busy but not crowded, with a handful of men at the bar and several tables occupied by townspeople having an early dinner. A small stage in the corner held a piano player picking out a gentle tune. Clara spotted Beau immediately. He sat at a corner table, his back to the wall, in the habit of men who spent time in less reputable establishments than this one. He was clean-shaven, his hair damp as if freshly washed, and he wore a shirt that looked new, or at least carefully pressed. He saw her almost as quickly, rising to his feet as she approached. "Miss Norwood, you came. Mr. Holloway delivered your invitation," she said, suddenly feeling awkward. "I hope I'm not interrupting." "Not at all." Beau pulled out a chair for her. "I was hoping you'd come. Have you eaten?" "They serve a decent stew here." Clara hesitated, then nodded. "Stew would be lovely, thank you." Beau signaled to the barkeeper, who nodded in acknowledgement. "And how was your day at the school? Any promising scholars among the bunch?" The simple question eased the tension, and Clara found herself telling Beau about her students, about Tommy Jenkins, who had a remarkable head for figures, and little Sarah Miller, who at 6 was already reading better than some of the older children. Beau listened attentively, asking questions that showed genuine interest. When their food arrived, Clara realized how hungry she was. The stew was indeed good, rich with vegetables and tender meat, served with a chunk of fresh bread that Mrs. Finch's offerings couldn't match. "Any word at the telegraph office today?" Beau asked after they had eaten in companionable silence for a while. Clara shook her head, focusing on her bowl. "No, but there will be eventually." Beau was quiet for a moment. "Clara, have you considered that there might not be a reply?" Clara set down her spoon, her appetite suddenly gone. "He's my father, Beau. He wouldn't just abandon me. People do all sorts of things we don't expect," Beau said gently. "Even family." "Not my father," Clara insisted, though the words sounded hollow even to her own ears. "He's just busy. Or perhaps ill, or the telegraph lines have been down. For 3 months, Clara stood abruptly. "Thank you for dinner, Mr. Quincy, but I should be going." Beau rose as well, his expression pained. "Clara, wait, I didn't mean to upset you." "Then what did you mean to do?" She kept her voice low, conscious of the other patrons who might be listening. "Convince me to give up on the only family I have left." Beau's blue eyes were steady on hers. "I meant to help you see that there might be other possibilities for your future. That you don't have to put your life on hold waiting for a reply that might never come." Clara felt tears threatening and blinked them away. "I appreciate your concern, but my future is my own to decide." She turned and walked out of the saloon, the cool evening air a shock against her flushed skin. She had made it halfway down the street before she heard Beau's footsteps behind her. "Clara, please," he called. "Let me walk you home." She kept walking, her pace quickening. "I'm perfectly capable of walking myself home, Mr. Quincy." He caught up to her easily, his long stride matching hers. "I know you are, but I'd like to apologize properly, and it's difficult to do when you're running away from me." Clara stopped, turning to face him. "I'm not running away." "No." There was a hint of a smile on his lips. "You move mighty fast for someone just taking a casual stroll." Despite herself, Clara felt her anger softening. "You always could make me smile when I least wanted to." "It's a gift," Beau said, his expression growing more serious. "I am sorry, Clara, I shouldn't have pushed." She sighed, looking up at the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. "No, you're right. I've been telling myself the same things for weeks now, that maybe he's ill or busy or the telegraph lines are down. But the truth is, if he wanted to contact me, he would have found a way." Beau was quiet, letting her speak. "It's just, if I admit that he's not coming back, that he's not sending for me, then what do I do? This town has nothing for me without him. The school position pays barely enough to survive, and there's no future in it." "There could be a future here," Beau said softly, "if you wanted one." Clara looked at him, really looked at him, for what felt like the first time in years. The boy she had known had become a man with plans and land of his own, a man who had worked for what he wanted and achieved it. "Beau, I'm not asking for anything, Clara," he said quickly. "Just saying that Copper Creek might have more to offer than you think." They had reached Mrs. Finch's boarding house, and Clara paused at the bottom of the steps. "Thank you for walking me home, and for dinner." "My pleasure." Beau tipped his hat. "Maybe I'll see you at the telegraph office tomorrow." Clara smiled faintly. "Maybe you will." That night, as Clara prepared for bed, she took the telegram from her pocket and read it again, though she knew the words by heart. "Arriving San Francisco, stop business prospects, good stop, will send for you soon, stop father." 3 simple lines, the last communication she had received. Clara had sent 5 telegrams since then, increasingly desperate messages asking for news, for confirmation that he was well, for some indication of when soon might be. All met with silence. For the first time, Clara allowed herself to consider the possibility that her father had started a new life, one that didn't include her. The thought was painful, a betrayal too deep to fully comprehend, but it also carried with it a strange sort of freedom. If he wasn't coming back for her, if he wasn't sending for her, then she was free to make her own choices, to build her own life. With that thought in her mind, Clara finally drifted off to sleep. The next day after school, Clara made her usual walk to the telegraph office. But today felt different, her step lighter despite the weight of her decision. If there was no telegram, and she was increasingly certain there wouldn't be, she would stop waiting. Stop hoping. Start living. Mr. Holloway's face held its usual sympathy when she entered. "Nothing today, Miss Norwood." Clara nodded, surprising herself with how little the news hurt. "Thank you, Mr. Holloway. I appreciate you checking every day." "Just doing my job, miss." He hesitated, then added, "Quincy was by earlier, said if I saw you to tell you he'd be at the livery stable this afternoon." Clara thanked him and left, her feet taking her toward the livery without conscious decision. The large barn at the edge of town housed the stage coach horses and offered boarding for travelers' mounts. As she approached, Clara could hear the rhythmic sound of hammering. She found Beau in one of the stalls, replacing a broken board. He worked with his shirt sleeves rolled up, revealing forearms corded with muscle. When he saw her, he straightened, setting down his hammer. "Miss Norwood," he said, sounding pleased but surprised. "Mr. Holloway gave you my message." "He did." Clara stepped closer, watching as Beau wiped his hands on a rag. "I thought I might take a walk before heading back to Mrs. Finch's. It's a lovely afternoon." Beau's smile widened. "It is at that. Give me a minute to finish up here, and I'd be happy to join you if that's what you're asking." "It is," Clara admitted. True to his word, Beau finished the repair quickly, then washed his hands at the pump outside. They set off together, heading west out of town where the desert stretched toward distant mountains, painted purple in the late afternoon light. "No telegram today?" Beau asked after they had walked in comfortable silence for a while. "No," Clara said, "and I think I'm done waiting for one." Beau glanced at her, his expression careful. "What changed?" "I realized that I've been putting my life on hold for a man who may have forgotten all about me." Clara looked out at the horizon. "My father made his choice when he left. It's time I made mine." "And what choice is that?" Beau's voice was steady, but Clara could hear the tension in it. She turned to face him fully. "To stay in Copper Creek, to make a life here on my own terms." Relief and something else, something warmer, flickered across Beau's features. "That's good to hear." They walked a bit further, coming to a small rise that offered a view of the town behind them and the open country ahead. Beau pointed to the north. "My land's that way, about an hour's ride. There's a creek that runs through it year-round, even in the dry season." "It sounds wonderful," Clara said, trying to picture it. "It's not much to look at yet," Beau admitted. "Just a small cabin and some fencing, but I have plans. Going to plant some crops this year, build up a small herd, maybe add on to the cabin next spring." "You always were a man with plans," Clara said, smiling at the enthusiasm in his voice. "Some plans take longer than others," Beau said, his gaze intense as it met hers. "Some are worth waiting for." Clara felt her heart quicken at his words, at the implication behind them. "Beau." "I'm not rushing you, Clara," he said quickly. "I know you've just made a big decision. I just want you to know that. Well, that my feelings haven't changed since I left 2 years ago." Clara looked down at her hands, then back up at his earnest face. "When you asked me to wait for you and I chose to stay with my father instead, I regretted it almost immediately." Hope brightened Beau's expression. "You did." "I did." Clara took a deep breath. "And now here you are back again, just when I needed someone to help me see clearly." Beau stepped closer, his hands coming to rest lightly on her arms. "I'm not asking you to make any decisions today, just to keep an open mind about what your future might hold." Clara nodded, suddenly very aware of how close he was, of the warmth of his hands through the fabric of her sleeves. "I can do that." The walk back to town was filled with easier conversation, with Beau telling her about his travels during the cattle drive and Clara sharing stories about her first days teaching at the school. By the time they reached Mrs. Finch's boarding house, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the street. "Will I see you tomorrow?" Beau asked as they paused at the bottom of the steps. "Yes," Clara said without hesitation, "but not at the telegraph office." Beau's smile was like the sunrise. "Where then?" "Surprise me," she said, feeling daring and light in a way she hadn't in months. "I can do that," he promised. Tipping his hat before turning to leave, Clara watched him go, a sense of possibility unfurling within her like a flower opening toward the sun. The next morning, Clara awoke to a tap on her window. When she looked out, she saw Beau below holding the reins of 2 horses. He gestured for her to come down, his expression eager. Clara dressed quickly, choosing her riding skirt and sturdy boots. "Mrs. Finch raised her eyebrows when Clara declined breakfast, but packed her a bundle of food without comment. "Good morning," Clara said as she joined Beau outside. "This is certainly a surprise." "Thought you might like to see my place," Beau said, helping her mount the gentle mare he'd brought for her. "It's a fine day for a ride." The journey north took them through rolling hills covered with desert scrub and the occasional stand of mesquite. Beau pointed out landmarks as they rode a distinctive rock formation, an ancient oak tree that had somehow survived in this harsh landscape, a distant mountain peak with a story attached to it. When they crested a final hill, Beau's ranch came into view. It was modest, as he had warned her, but Clara could immediately see its potential. A small cabin stood near a creek lined with cottonwoods, their leaves shimmering silver-green in the morning light. A corral held a few horses, and the beginnings of fenced pasture stretched toward the north. "It's beautiful," Clara said, meaning it. "It's a start," Beau replied, pride evident in his voice. "Come on, I'll show you around." They spent the morning exploring the property, with Beau pointing out all the improvements he planned to make. Clara found herself caught up in his enthusiasm, offering suggestions that Beau received with serious consideration. "You'd put the garden there," he asked when she indicated a flat spot near the creek. "The soil looks rich, and it would be easy to water," Clara explained. "And it's close enough to the cabin that whoever is cooking could just step outside for fresh vegetables." Beau looked at her thoughtfully. "Whoever is cooking, huh?" Clara blushed, realizing the assumption in her words. "I just meant in general." They ate lunch under the shade of a cottonwood, the creek bubbling beside them. The food Mrs. Finch had packed, cold chicken, bread, and apple tarts, tasted better in the open air, shared with pleasant company. "Thank you for bringing me here," Clara said as they finished eating. "I can see why you love it. I'm glad you like it," Beau said, his expression turning serious. "Clara, I know it's soon, and I know you're just starting to think about your own future, but I want you to know that there's a place for you here if you want it." Clara's heart raced at his words. "Beau, are you asking?" "I'm asking you to consider it," he said carefully. "To think about a life here with me, not right away, not until you're ready, but someday." Clara looked around at the ranch, at the creek and the cottonwoods, at the small cabin that could become a home, at the man beside her who had always been honest, always been kind, always been patient. "I don't need someday," she said softly. "I've wasted enough time waiting for something that was never going to happen." Beau's eyes widened. "Clara, are you saying?" "I'm saying yes," she said, her voice growing stronger with certainty. "Yes, I want a place here with you." The joy that spread across Beau's face was like nothing Clara had ever seen. He reached for her hands, holding them tightly in his own. "I've loved you since I was 20 years old, Clara Norwood," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I never stopped, not for a single day." "I think I've loved you too," she admitted. "I was just too blind to see it, too loyal to a father who didn't deserve that loyalty." Beau raised a hand to her cheek, his touch gentle. "May I kiss you, Clara, please?" she whispered. His lips met hers, soft at first, then with growing passion as Clara responded, her arms sliding around his neck to pull him closer. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless. "Well," Beau said, his smile threatening to split his face in two, "I reckon that settles it." Clara laughed, feeling lighter than she had in years. "I reckon it does." They rode back to town in the late afternoon, making plans for their future with every mile. Clara would finish out the school term and they would be married in the spring. Beau would expand the cabin, adding a proper bedroom and a larger kitchen. They would plant the garden where Clara had suggested and start a small orchard as well. As they approached Copper Creek, Clara felt a moment of hesitation. "Beau, wait." He pulled his horse to a stop beside hers, looking at her questioningly. "There's something I need to do first." Understanding dawned in his eyes, and he nodded. They rode directly to the telegraph office, where Mr. Holloway was preparing to close for the day. "Miss Norwood," he said, surprised to see her so late. "Mr. Quincy?" "Mr. Holloway," Clara said, her voice steady. "I'd like to send one last telegram, please." The operator nodded, reaching for his forms. Clara dictated the message carefully. "Father stop waited 3 months for reply stop moving forward with my life stop marrying Beau Quincy in spring stop. Will be at Norwood Ranch, Copper Creek if you wish to find me stop Clara." Mr. Holloway counted the words, took Clara's payment, and promised to send it right away. As they left the office, Clara felt as if a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. "You didn't have to do that," Beau said as they walked their horses toward the livery. "I did," Clara replied. "Not for him, for me. I needed to close that chapter before I could truly begin ours." Beau's smile was understanding. "And has it closed, I mean?" Clara reached for his hand, twining her fingers with his. "Yes, that telegram was my goodbye to waiting, my hello to living." They paused outside the livery stable, the sunset painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Beau pulled Clara close, his arms strong around her waist. "I should have just said it back then, when you were standing outside that telegraph office looking so lost," he murmured against her hair. I should have said I'll answer you, Clara. I'll be the reply you've been waiting for. Clara tilted her face up to his, her heart full. You did, Beau. In every way that matters, you did. As he lowered his lips to hers once more, Clara knew with absolute certainty that she would never again waste another day waiting for messages that wouldn't come, for people who didn't truly value her. Instead, she would build a life with this man who had ridden back into town just when she needed him most, who had shown her that sometimes the answer you're looking for comes in an entirely unexpected form. And as the first stars appeared in the evening sky, Clara and Beau walked hand in hand toward their future, leaving the telegraph office and all its silent promises behind.